There is a moment, just one moment, that separates the people who move through life getting stepped on from the people the world quietly rearranges itself around. And here's the unsettling part. It has nothing to do with intelligence, money, looks, or luck. It's a switch in the mind, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let me show you what I mean. Picture two people walking into the exact same room, same job interview, same negotiation, same first date, same room, same stakes, same words even. And yet one of them leaves with everything they wanted, and the other leaves wondering what just happened. Same room, different reality. Why? Because one of them was operating from a script written by fear, and the other was operating from a script they wrote themselves. Stay with me here, because this is going to get uncomfortable before it gets useful. Most people spend their entire lives reacting. Someone raises their voice, they shrink. Someone goes cold, they chase. Someone criticizes them. They spiral for 3 days, replaying it in the shower. And they call this being sensitive, or being a good person, or just how I am. But what it actually is a nervous system that has handed the steering wheel to everyone except its owner. Now here's where it gets interesting. The people who seem to bend the world to their will, and I'm not talking about the loud ones, the ones shouting in boardrooms, because that's not power, that's just noise. I'm talking about the quiet ones, the ones who somehow never seem rattled, the ones who say less and get more. They've discovered something most people never will. The world responds to your internal state, not your external effort. Read that again. The world responds to your internal state, not your external effort. You can work twice as hard as someone else, be twice as prepared, twice as deserving, and still lose to them in that room because they walked in regulated and you walked in performing. And people, even if they can't name it, feel the difference between regulation and performance. It's in your voice. It's in the half-second pause before you answer. It's in whether your eyes dart or hold. It's in whether you're asking for the room's approval or simply occupying the room. This is the first shift you have to make if you want the world to bend rather than you bending to it. Stop asking, silently, invisibly, in every interaction, "Do you approve of me?" Because the moment you're asking that question, even underneath the surface, you've already lost the room. You've handed them the pen. And people, especially the manipulative ones, the narcissistic ones, the ones who feed on exactly this, they can smell that question on you before you've said a single word. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Elena. Elena was, by every external measure, remarkable, ran a department of 40 people, brilliant strategist, and yet every single time she was in a room with her director, a man who had built his entire career on subtle intimidation, the kind that never says anything overtly cruel, just lets silence do the cruelty for him, Elena would shrink. Her sentences got shorter. Her voice got higher. She'd agree to things she didn't agree with, just to end the discomfort of his stare. And one day, almost by accident, she changed one single thing. Not her arguments, not her preparation, not even her tone exactly. She changed her relationship to the silence. Instead of rushing to fill the gap after he went quiet, because that gap, that uncomfortable stretch of nothing, is exactly what people like him are trained to create, it's a pressure tactic, whether he was doing it consciously or not. Instead of rushing to fill it, she let it sit. She looked at him. She breathed. She let 5 full seconds pass, which, trust me, feels like an eternity in a tense room. And she said nothing until she had something worth saying. And something shifted in that room. Not because she said anything brilliant, but because for the first time, he was the one waiting on her. That's the switch. That's the whole podcast in one moment, honestly. Whoever is more comfortable in the silence controls the room. Now, I want to be really careful here, because this can sound like I'm telling you to become cold, or manipulative, or to play games with people. That is not what this is. There's a very important difference between self-possession and manipulation, and it's this. Manipulation is about controlling someone else's internal state for your benefit. Self-possession is simply refusing to let someone else control yours. One is an act of aggression, the other is an act of sovereignty. And the wild thing is, sovereignty is so rare now that people mistake it for power, when really it's just peace. Weaponized peace, if you want to call it that. This is exactly why narcissists struggle so much against genuinely calm people, and it's also exactly why they're drawn to them. It's a strange paradox, but stay with me. A narcissist's entire operating system runs on extracting a reaction. Rage, tears, defensiveness, over-explaining, chasing, begging for approval. Any of these feed them, because their sense of self isn't generated internally, it has to be pulled from you. It's like a battery that can't charge itself. It has to plug into someone else's nervous system to survive. So when they meet someone calm, someone who doesn't perform for them, doesn't chase, doesn't over-explain, doesn't flinch at the silent treatment, two things can happen. Either they escalate because the lack of reaction is intolerable to them and they need to find the button that works. Or, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, they become almost magnetically obsessed with that person. Because that calm represents the one thing they can never generate for themselves. This is why some of you listening right now have had the exact experience of being love-bombed by someone who, in hindsight, was clearly disordered. It wasn't random. It's because in that early stage, you weren't performing for them yet. You were just being yourself, calm, unbothered, whole, and they mistook your wholeness for a challenge worth winning. And then once they won you, once you started adjusting yourself around their moods, once you started performing again, the interest often faded, not because you changed as a person, but because the thing that fascinated them, your self-contained calm, was gone. You handed them the very thing that made you interesting, and you did it by accident, out of love, out of fear, out of the very human desire to keep the peace. I want you to sit with that for a second because I think it reframes a lot of painful relationships in a completely different light. Now, here's where most people get the entire concept backwards. They think the goal is to become unreadable, cold, a fortress. And that's a trap too, because a fortress can't connect with anyone, and connection is still the entire point of being alive. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stop needing the other person's reaction to validate what you're already feeling. There's a difference between I feel hurt and I need you to feel bad about it so I know I matter, and I feel hurt and I know I matter regardless of what you do next. The words might come out almost identical in a conversation, but the energy behind them is opposite, and people feel that difference in their bones, even when they can't articulate it. So how do you actually build this? Because awareness alone doesn't change behavior. If it did, therapists would be out of business. You need practice, real reps, in real moments of discomfort. And that's exactly where we're going next, because I want to walk you through the 3 specific situations where this shows up the most. The silent treatment, the sudden compliment that feels like a trap, and the conversation where someone tries to rewrite what actually happened right in front of you, and give you the exact internal move to make in each one. Because knowing the theory means nothing if the moment it matters most, you freeze. Let's keep going. Let's start with the silent treatment, because almost everyone listening has experienced it, and almost everyone has gotten it completely wrong. Not because they're weak, but because nobody ever taught them what silence actually is in a manipulative dynamic. Here's the truth nobody says out loud. Silence is a message. It is not the absence of communication. It is communication. When someone goes cold on you, stops responding, gives you the flat stare, the one-word answers, they are speaking a very clear sentence. And that sentence is, I am in control of this interaction now, and I want you to feel the discomfort of not knowing why. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. It's not mysterious. It's not them processing. It's a bid for control, disguised as withdrawal. And the instinctive human response, the one wired into almost all of us from childhood, because most of us learned love as something that could be withdrawn, is to chase it, to ask, did I do something wrong? To apologize for things we're not even sure we did. to over-explain ourselves into a corner. And every single one of those responses does the same thing. It confirms to the other person that the silence worked. It teaches them, on a nervous system level, that withdrawing from you is an effective lever to pull whenever they want something. So what's the move instead? It's not to match the silence with your own Cold War. That's just two people trying to outsuffer each other, and it usually ends in resentment, not resolution. The move is what I'd call warm disengagement. You stay warm, you don't become cruel, you don't punish back, but you disengage from the chase. You go live your life. You respond to the silence the way you'd respond to weather. Acknowledge it, don't argue with it, and continue existing. Okay, seems like you need some space. I'm here when you're ready to talk. And then you actually mean it. You actually go be ready when you're ready, not performing readiness while secretly checking your phone every 4 minutes. This one sentence, delivered once, calmly, and then followed by actual behavioral follow-through, does something almost no amount of pleading ever accomplishes. It removes the audience. And manipulation, at its core, requires an audience. Remove the audience, and the performance loses its entire purpose. Now let's talk about the second one, the sudden compliment that feels like a trap. This one is subtler, and honestly, it's the one that catches even psychologically aware people off guard, because compliments are supposed to feel good, and our whole nervous system is wired to relax when we receive one. But there's a specific kind of compliment, you'll know it when I describe it, that isn't actually praise. It's a hook. It sounds like, "Wow, I'm surprised you actually pulled that off," or "You're so much smarter than people give you credit for," or "My personal least favorite, I like you so much more than the last person in this role. They were a disaster." On the surface, these sound like compliments. Underneath, they're doing something very specific. They're establishing a hierarchy, a comparison, a slight insinuation of surprise that you were competent at all. And they're doing it while wrapped in the packaging of kindness, which makes them almost impossible to call out without you looking paranoid or ungrateful. The reason this works on people is that we're trained to say thank you automatically when something sounds like praise, and that automatic thank you is exactly the reaction the compliment was designed to extract. It's not really about you. It's a test to see whether you'll accept the framing that you're surprising, that you're better than some imaginary disaster, that your worth is comparative rather than inherent. The move here isn't to reject the compliment or get defensive. That just makes you look insecure and proves their unspoken point. The move is to receive the kind part and quietly decline the framing. Something as simple as, "Thanks, I appreciate that." Full stop, no engaging with the comparison, no laughing along with the jab at the last person, no confirming the surprise. You take the sugar and leave the hook sitting there, untouched, in plain sight. Most people who do this, the backhanded compliment, the comparison trap, are testing dozens of people a week to see who bites. Be the one who doesn't. And now the third one, which I saved for last because it's the most disorienting. When someone rewrites what actually happened right in front of you with total confidence. This is the one that makes people question their own memory, their own sanity, and it's exactly why it's such an effective tool for people with narcissistic patterns, because reality itself becomes the battlefield instead of the actual disagreement. It sounds like, "I never said that," when you clearly remember they did, or "You're the one who started this, not me." Delivered with such conviction that you actually pause and think, "Wait, did I?" Or the classic, "You're remembering it wrong, you always do this." That last one is particularly insidious because it doesn't just deny the specific event. It plants a seed that your memory itself is unreliable, which means every future disagreement, you'll doubt yourself before you even start. Here's what almost nobody tells you. You do not need them to agree with your version of reality in order for your version to be true. That sentence right there might be the single most important idea in this entire podcast, so let me say it again, slower. You do not need their agreement for your memory to be valid. The instinct is to fight for their agreement, to bring up evidence, to say, "No, you definitely said this. I remember exactly where we were standing." And sometimes, sure, if you have a text message, show it. That's fine. But the deeper move, the one that actually protects your mind long term, is to stop needing them to co-sign your reality at all. You can simply say, "I remember it differently, and I'm not going to argue about who's right, but I know what I experienced." And then you stop. You don't need the debate to conclude in your favor. You need to conclude it internally and walk away intact. This is what all three of these situations have in common, if you notice: the silent treatment, the backhanded compliment, the rewritten history. They are all, underneath the surface, attempts to make your reality dependent on their reaction. And every single tool we just talked about does the exact same thing in a different costume. It hands your reality back to you. That's the whole secret, if I had to compress this entire podcast into one sentence. The world doesn't bend for the loudest person in the room, or the smartest, or even the kindest. It bends for the person who no longer needs the room's permission to know who they are. You don't need them to understand you. You don't need them to validate the version of events you know is true. You don't need the silence to end on their terms, or the compliment to be taken at face value, or the argument to be won out loud. You just need to keep walking back to the one place they can never actually touch, the part of you that already knows. And the strange, almost poetic thing about all of this, the thing I want you to leave with today, is that the moment you stop needing the world to bend is usually the exact moment it starts to.